I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. But today I can tell you I am a woman who is full of life. That's who I am. Well, I think about it about 2 years ago. It wasn't until I got diagnosed with breast cancer that I didn't realize that the life that I was living was for other people. I wasn't living my life. I was living the life for other people, for my children, for my husband, just for people in general. But I wasn't living for Patricia. It wasn't until uh, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and at that time, it was, I don't want to say it was a shocker as much as it was a wake up call that life is so precious and we spend it so many years just doing things that really don't matter. And we push our dreams to the side. But it was that time when I was diagnosed with breast cancer that I realized my life could end today, tomorrow. I didn't know the severity of it, but that's when my wake up call hit. And I was introduced to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Moore, who's an alternative practitioner. And he took me on a journey. He changed my whole lifestyle. And when I say my whole lifestyle, I'm talking spirit, mind, and body. Spiritually, I have been holding on to a lot of baggage that I wasn't even aware of that even existed. But as he began to do the emotional therapy on me, I realized that there was some deep seated pain and hurt that I had not dealt with, and not just pain, just circumstances. Well, the impact on it is you never would imagine losing a sibling at such a young age. She was 43 when she passed away. And the impact it had on me, I would say she was kind of like the pioneer for our family to recognize that there are other ways of dealing with cancer. She just didn't, she knew what she needed to do, she just didn't have the direction. And when I say she knew what she needed to do, she wanted to make a lifestyle change. She knew that changing her eating habits was very important and that it would contribute to the recovery or the fighting against cancer, but she just didn't have the education, the know how, or the direction. She had breast cancer. Well, my mother had ovarian cancer, and she passed at the age of 40. And my father had breast cancer. He passed at the age of 65. Well, the impact that it had on my life was, I wouldn't say it was so much the cancer that it did play a vital part in impacting some of the decisions that I made, but I have been a sickly child all my life, battling with asthma, allergies, food allergies, skin disorders. And so it wasn't until I had went to one of my dermatologists and I asked him about my eczema, if there was any cure for it, and my dermatologist told me that it was incurable and it was just something that I had to live with. And at that point in my life, I always believe with every problem, there's a solution. And that's where my journey began. The impact of the cancer with my parents, I there were times that I would often think to myself, will I be next, or will one of my family, my sisters or one of my brothers, who's going to be next? I wouldn't say I didn't think I was cursed, But just from the family history, not just my parents and my sister, but you're looking at my grandparents, my grandmother, my aunt, all of my relatives on my father's side, all of the women, even some of the men battled breast cancer. So, the thought of it being so prevalent in our family, I did question whether I was going to be the next one or was one of my brothers or sisters. And I wanted to get a jump start on it. I knew that there were things that you can do to prevent it. And I were taking certain steps, just kind of in the blind, to prevent that from coming into my body or exposing itself in my body. Well, growing up, cancer wasn't a thing that was really talked about. And when you heard the word, you automatically associated it with death. There was no cure, there wasn't any true solution to cancer. It was chemo, radiation, and that was it. And then you hope for the best. When my husband got diagnosed with cancer, with prostate cancer, it came as a shock because I was expecting it to just be a stomach virus. That's what we thought it was. He was doing so good with the quote unquote chemotherapy treatment that I just knew he was going to beat it. But he lasted, let me see, my husband lived for, it was from March to August. So about 5 months into the treatment, I woke up one day and he had passed in his sleep. So that right there, with him passing away from such a stringent treatment, I I was at a loss. As far as when I say at a loss, when you hear about cancer research and how advanced they are and how great the medication is and how well people are doing with it, that incident right there just took all hope away in such a treatment such as chemotherapy. And for me, I'm just saying for myself, because you think about my mom, chemotherapy, my dad, chemotherapy, my sister, chemotherapy, my husband, chemotherapy, and what the effects were. You can't blame it all on the effects of chemotherapy. The questions that I did start kind of running through my mind were, why did they take so long? Why didn't they say anything, when they started feeling the symptoms? So I can't blame it all on the chemotherapy. Chemotherapy did play, in my opinion, a vital part in their passing, but also the fact that they ignored a condition that was present for whatever reason. I think it was both, that they ignored it and there was a fear. There was a fear of um, cancer. There was a fear of an unknown object, or there was a unknown foreign object that was in their body that they knew wasn't normal. Some people don't do anything. Some people just let it sit until it's beyond, it's too painful to where they can't tolerate the pain anymore. And then they do something about it. And then some people don't do anything about it at all. My aunt had breast cancer. And back in the days, I mean, you talking about maybe the 1800, 1918, 1920, when women would wrap themselves. Well, you're looking at the 20th, 21st century, and here my aunt has breast cancer, but her mindset is, we'll just wrap it. I think they're not being educated enough. I think it's commercialized. They're getting the surface information as far as research, mammograms, ultrasounds, just the basic. But the real in-depth parts of it, especially in the African American community, I just don't believe that they're getting enough education in the realm of cancer. Well, I think it's because of demographics. I think it has something to do with demographics and your financial status. I really do. Um, and then I just believe that there's this generational mentality that's passed down from generation to generation that our faith in God will heal us. And I think that plays, you know, a part in why a lot of the African American community, either they're ignoring the education that's out there or they're not even looking for it because it's out there. The information is out there. I just don't think it's being brought to our community. To a point, yes. And the reason why I say that, for myself, I would get my annual mammogram. It wasn't until they found the lump in my breast that the mammogram wasn't the answer. They wouldn't have never found the lump with the mammogram. They had to do further testing, which was an ultrasound. So my question was, why aren't they communicating that? Why aren't they telling you the other options, the other steps? Also, genetic testing that I had mentioned earlier. I had requested genetic testing be done way before being diagnosed with breast cancer. Well, I was doing my own self-examination and I just got out the shower and I felt a lump. Now, the lump didn't alarm me because I had had a breast reduction prior and I had scar tissue. So I just accounted it to being scar tissue. But also understanding how breast cancer or lumps can develop, I kept an eye on it for about a week. And I gave myself a week. And if nothing had changed, then I told myself I was going to go and get it checked out. So when I went and got it checked out, my doctor, my physician agreed, thought it was just scar tissue because where the lump was laying, the area that it was laying at, we thought it was scar tissue. And it wasn't until they did the ultrasound, and even with the ultrasound, still the same thought. It's just scar tissue. So it wasn't until, and I really appreciate the staff and the technician that was doing my ultrasound because they were very thorough. They just didn't want to leave it at an ultrasound and say, well, it looks like it's scar tissue. They took it a step further and said, let's biopsy this. And they took a biopsy. And that's how we came to the conclusion that it was breast cancer. Well, I actually was at work. I was at work and I got a phone call from the doctor's office. And it was almost like I could remember it like it was yesterday. And the doctor asked me if I had time to talk. And I stepped away from my station. And at that point, I was told that the results came back positive, that I had breast cancer. And for a moment, I I stood. I just stood still, and I just kind of had to digest it all. And just thinking about all the things that had I had gone through just recently, losing my husband 8 months prior, my mind began to go into a strategic mode of what was I going to do to fight this disease. I took off from work and I went to the lake. And when I say I went to the lake, it's something about water and just being out in an environment like that just really allows me to open my mind and clear my thoughts and just regain my some sense of direction. So that's what I did. I went to the lake and I mulled it over in my head maybe about 2 or 3 days if I was really going to tell my family. Well, I told my immediate family, my children and one of my sisters, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to expose that. But then I thought to myself, this is the problem. This is, if I didn't say anything, I would be following down the same tracks or the same road that my parents, my sister, and my husband went down. And I wasn't going to be silent about it. Well, what I did is at that moment, I knew I wanted to do alternative. I knew I didn't want to do chemotherapy. So I reached out to a local practitioner here in Texas and told him I wanted to do alternative. And I was introduced to supplements, alkaline water. But I took it a step further and I told one of my girlfriends about my diagnosis. And she had introduced me, gave me the number to a practitioner. And she told me, Patricia, I think this is the answer. I think he can help you out. And so I gave him a call. His name is Dr. Timothy Moore, also known as the chef. I gave him a call and I was told he was a vegan chef. And when I made that phone call, I was nervous, naturally. This was foreign. His language was foreign to me. So I never really heard of a raw vegan. I've heard of vegetarians. I didn't know what that world was like. But deep down inside, I knew within myself that I had made the right choice or the right decision by reaching out to Dr. Moore. So, what I did is I followed the protocol. And when I say the protocol, he had given me some instructions prior. He had given me some instructions of what to expect. And so I began to mentally prepare myself for the journey. The journey was, it started out as a roller coaster, first of all. And I say a roller coaster because when you're stepping into a zone of information that you're not familiar with, it is like a roller coaster. But in my mind, I thought I'm in it for the ride. And so it was a challenge. When I say it was challenging, that meant I had to give up my processed foods, sugar. I loved pork chops, mashed potatoes, butter, oil, all of that. And I really had to ask myself, was it worth it? It was worth it for me 100%. And I would not call it a diet. It's definitely a lifestyle change. And with it being a lifestyle change, 2 years ago, I was about 25 pounds heavier than what I am now. So the lifestyle change, was it worth it? You bet. Was it because of the weight loss? That was just part of the benefits. What I've discovered about myself is I have dreams. What I discovered is I have been putting other people's dreams before my dreams. What I've discovered about myself is there's things that I can do and I can accomplish only if I set my mind to it. I've learned a lot about healing the body naturally, not just the body, but my mental state, healing, changing the way that I think. And now, as I'm learning more about the world of health and wellness, people that I talk to now sounds like a foreign language because it's a world that I'm no longer a part of. Well, your whole lifestyle changes. And when I say your whole lifestyle changes, whereas driving down the street, I will pull over and I can go to Burger King, I can go to McDonald's, I can go to Whataburger and grab me some fast food. Well, that life no longer exists. I take my time and I go home. If I'm going to eat, I have prepared foods. And it's a lot easier. It does take some work where you have to cut up your carrots, your prepare your salads, prepare. I'm not much of a cook, so the raw vegan lifestyle really kind of fits me uh, because I can just pick up uh, a carrot or a cucumber or whatever and chomp on it, and I'm satisfied. Well, for the person who just got diagnosed, got the message, and if I were to encounter them, I would first start with just suggesting making little changes, small changes in what you're eating, the company that you keep. That makes a world of a difference because if you are surrounded by people, a negative environment, that is going to make your journey, your whole treatment so much worse. It's going to make I shouldn't say worse, but I would say stressful. But I would recommend considering changing the foods that you eat, changing your thought life, forgiving, learning how to forgive yourself, learning how to forgive others for hurting you. There was a point in my life I thought that I had forgiven um, everyone that had done me wrong. I didn't realize that there was a deep seated root that was attached, that had attached itself that I hadn't really dealt with. So I wouldn't call it bitterness. I would say that it was more anger that was still resonating inside of me. And when you have anger like that feeling inside of you, all that's doing is feeding the cancer. I'm cancer free. Today, I'm cancer free. 2 years as of April the 5th. I can sit and tell you I'm cancer free.